What's the heat getting turned up by? The expectations of clients?
Technology is driving it, but it's not the technology, right? It's data.
What's the kind of training that firms need to do to make use of these tools? What is the not fun stuff?
Make a clear case. We need to change the model. We need to change our investment strategy to turn the threat into an opportunity.
What does a law firm's data strategy look like? What does it look like to go from like the absence of a data strategy to the presence of a data strategy at a firm?
I'm Conan Hines. I'm Director of Legal Technology at Fried Frank, all of almost 5 months.
I'm Brian Davis, CTO of Centauri, and I'm excited to be here to talk about legal innovation, legal technology, and many other topics. Thanks so much for being part of the conversation today, Conan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, super fun.
How's it going?
Going well.
It's great to be here.
Great to see you. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Yeah, I mean, I've only known you through vicarious, but I feel like I've known you because I think you saw the raw TikTok
That's
footage.
Right. I did.
Before it came out. I mean, you've seen the unseen footage, really.
Kevin passed it to me. I think you were asking. So I guess I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself.
Please.
Yeah. So my first I studied Chinese and history as an undergrad, and I moved to Beijing in 2008, and I did a lot of crazy stuff. But some of the things I did over there is I was a legal translator. So I translated academic legal work about legal reform in China from Chinese into English. And I also acted as an interpreter for some transactional attorneys that were, their primary job was managing inbound investment into China and the contracts that get signed with local entities and things like that. And they were doing a big outbound trip to Europe, and I accompanied them as their kind of like accompanying interpreter. So that was sort of my main era of exposure to the legal industry in a previous life. And then I decided over the course of the next 2 years to take a really big left turn and go back to the United States and go to grad school for technical discipline. And I studied statistics and operations research, which are very much related and part of machine learning and part of software. And that was in my home state of North Carolina. And after graduating from my master's degree, went to begin working in technology. And I've been working in technology now for, I guess, almost 10 years. And so it's been a lot on the sort of quantitative marketing side, a lot of it on ranking systems and stuff like that. Last was working at Nextdoor, before that at Facebook, and then before that I was at Indeed, the job search company. And Kevin and I linked up last year because I was on a sort of intentional year-long exploratory sabbatical. I was exploring a lot of legal AI ideas because of issues that we can talk about. I was really motivated to kind of like, this is like an interesting space. And so Kevin and I have been working together for the past year and on Centauri. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. You can make some serious coin doing Chinese legal translation.
Well, it's interesting because translation as a profession is very painstaking. It's very much like a services industry. Yeah. And I also, to be frank, I kind of saw the writing on the wall of it becoming something that software could do.
Yeah.
And it increasingly has.
And definitely.
Yeah. And the highest rank of interpreters, and I've got a few friends who have stayed in the industry for a long time, the people that are doing diplomatic interpreting, court interpreting, and things like that, that remains relatively unassailable by software still. But they're beginning to do augmented workflows, right? Sure. They're beginning to okay, if you need to catch up, we've got here this tracking along and giving you a guide as the previous points that were addressed and stuff like that. So it seems like the next generation of interpreters may be a lot fewer. There might be, and that's sort of the story.
They might just be doing fine checks.
Exactly. And I feel like that's what's happening across a lot of different industries.
Yeah. Well, I guess there too, you can, they have the data, right?
Right,
so they're just going to keep training
right.
on it. So us law firms, we got to make sure we don't,
So
what was
your what was your law school path? What was your your pathway into law?
It's not maybe some of the typical paths that you might cross on some of these podcasts.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't have a real plan.
Yeah.
I think it was that I didn't have a plan, so I needed to do something to stall for a little longer.
Yeah.
I went to law school. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I really didn't have a desire to necessarily be a practicing lawyer. I had other interests as well. So when I got out of law school, I'm kind of like an amateur musician. It's stress the amateur. But I think there was a moment there where I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to do music and then just do like some, find a job where I can that pays the bills. Funny enough, maybe just to jump beyond law school, but like funny enough, I ended up in what is probably the biggest e-data practice, and I was just reviewing documents, right? And unlike you, I had no technical background, but like you, I was at least saw like this seems like machines could do a lot of this, right?
And this is sort of the e-discovery process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was involved in the e-discovery process, and then from there I was I went to another mid-sized firm at that point, and then the recession hit, and all these sort of blank checks that were getting paid by unsophisticated clients, started to get looked at outside of legal departments, more in procurement and finance areas. So that's when I, it was funny because we just got married. I was interviewing, but like literally came home from getting married, and I told my wife we were moving in New York, and I went to, because there wasn't really a lot of opportunity in Philly at the time, and it was like New York, DC, San Fran. Yep. So packed our bags, went to New York, and went into e-discovery for a few years, then got jobs in big law, which eventually became legal innovation. And
when you say getting into, I guess one thing I thought of was, I'm curious, when you began your legal career, what was the state of e-discovery at that point?
I mean, it was electronic. I kind of look at it like paper, electronic. Now we're in digital, right? It's just like we're just taking paper and putting it on machines. Like that was kind of this interim, era that we had. So that's what it was. We were using software, and everything was mom and pops back then. Right now, you might have 4 or 5, big, huge conglomerate e-discovery companies. Back then, I mean, literally, like it was like if you go to Switzerland and see all the mom and pop banks. That's kind of how it was in DC and New York. And
what kind of services were they providing? Just like massive review of documents?
Yeah, well, I mean, they provided multiple services. Some of them actually, I mean, if you even predate e-discovery, it was scanning. Right. That was the big
digitization.
Industry. Right. Yeah. It was, or
electronification.
Yeah. Because I feel like there wasn't really in any sort of format that you could do much with, besides you could now read it on a computer and maybe do a keyword search. So you had a lot of proprietary softwares. So these mom and pops they were building software, and then they were also providing like project management, and then also like staffing, to scale up bodies.
Right.
People like me.
Right.
So it was a crazy time, and at that time the law firms controlled the whole space. They controlled the whole business. Clients came to the law firms, and they did all the work. They worked with the vendors. They would bring things into house. There was a lot of overhead brought in to IT departments and law firms, and slowly it's a massive industry in the legal context, and eventually, and it's not really legal work, a lot of it. So eventually, it was going to get unbundled, and it was going to become a new type of product, and only a few firms probably.
In my own sort of understanding of the legal tech industry and the adoption of technology by this industry, e-discovery comes up again and again as being this sort of wave, which people sort of remember. It's still, a lot of attorneys remember pre-e-discovery days and post-e-discovery days, and how there was this pressure to adopt. And there was like even though perhaps it wasn't incentive aligned as we think about in the legal industry, because ostensibly for a long time you could probably bill for the discovery process. That's part of the labor and the work. Yeah. But the economic pressures and the efficiencies across the industry made it so that you had to be demonstrating efficiency. You had to be demonstrating that you were using best-in-class methods. And I'm curious, from the being a part of that transition, do you feel like now feels like a similar transition?
I mean, I might be divulging my internal strategy here and how I want to talk to the business at Fried Frank, but yeah, I do. The difference I see is e-discovery is contained. It's a phase of work in a practice area. So as big as it might be the biggest phase, monetarily, of any phase of legal work that you can imagine, but it's still contained. At the end of the day, there's still legal work to be done, and there's all of these other practice areas, right, that don't really involve e-discovery type workflows. Legal AI, as maybe we'll call it, I don't know. It's not as cool, I guess, as e-discovery, but I feel it is on the same kind of warpath, and it's but this time it's existential because there's really no practice or lawyer that is out of the sight lines.
Interesting. Existential threat or existentially transformative, or what do you see it as? Do you see it as a threat, or
if law firms confront legal AI like they confronted e-discovery, then it's a threat. Okay, I think we can use the e-discovery phenomenon as a clear example, very close to home. I like to use other examples like, oh, look at the story of Nintendo or something. These are like cool, innovative companies. But when you talk about something that was, even if you're not a litigator, down the hall, you knew people that were doing this kind of work, that is, that ears perk up, that resonates. Yeah. And so I think you could make a clear case. We need to change the model. We need to change our investment strategy to turn the threat into an opportunity.
Right. Do you find that there's resistance among firms, or what's the profile of cultural disposition? The legal industry in general gets a reputation for being slow to adopt. A lot of the classic ornery attorney who's like not very inclined to change their methods and change their ways. I'd say that in our own work, we've seen a huge variation in how open people are to using technology. They may or may not be held back by their own resistance, but rather by the concerns of their internal operations process or even their clients. One thing that was quite ironic is the fact that these Fortune 500 companies that were dealing with a law firm that are all clearly using the cloud for every single transaction that they could imagine are not allowing their law firm to use the cloud. And so it's like, okay, come on, this is being held back, but it's not always by any of the firm culture.
Yeah. I just think it's a bad take to say lawyers are bad at adopting technology. My line is, law school is for smart folks who want to get as far away as technology as they can. I don't think that's much as the case anymore, right? Just because of the generation that the new graduates have come up in. And if you look at it, we're not corporations. It's very, very different than a corporation being in a partnership, and not even that's the organizational structure, but that I was explaining it to someone earlier today. I look at law firms as McDonald's, right? And all the partners are franchisees, right? But even beyond that, it's like if it wasn't just all McDonald's shops, but it was all different types of shops where they made different types of cuisine, right? So maybe it's
a food court or something,
right? It's kind of like a food court. So there's some ubiquitous threads, right, that you can bring in enterprise software to help serve, but that has a ceiling on it. And so now you're like, okay, yeah, you can help me with maybe reviewing a document, and you can help me maybe with finding something, searching for something. But at some point, it starts to diverge depending on what kind of practice you're doing. And the legal industry is not the manufacturing industry or the healthcare industry, right? It's how much investment is going to be put into the legal industry. So now it's not just like massive companies that build a widget or a couple widgets that spawn out of maybe one kind of core capability. You're building all different types of widgets, and it's also there is no standard, because if you work in big law, you are solving novel, complex problems, which, yes, you need some of the past to help you serve the client, but you also need to be creative, and you actually need to innovate as a lawyer, which that's a whole other thing. When we talk about legal innovation, I'm like, lawyers actually don't agree with me. They're actually, I'm fine with it. But I'm like, if you're a great lawyer, you're an innovator. Nothing to do with technology necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
But, that's who you are,
right.
Because, you're basically, it's all about your reputation. It's high stakes. right? High pressure, it's not for
Yeah.
everybody. So I think the technology piece is just like they don't have time, right? They need people, and I think the new wave of new types of domain experts who aren't necessarily practicing attorneys is probably the right way to go, so they can spend the time and represent the folks who are billing.
Right. Interesting. You mentioned the fact that if we take the food court metaphor, right?
I'm liking this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the food court metaphor, we have a bunch of different chefs serving in different styles. A lot of them, like, if we find this mall's Chinese restaurant and that mall's Chinese restaurant might have more in common than any single restaurant within the same mall, right? But it's within that same mall, or like within all the different practice areas in a firm, they share access to resources, they share data, they share a lot of like core infrastructure and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, there's so much nuance in like the ways that all these practice areas vary. What do you see as the role of technology? And technology is very much built on the idea of finding a reproducible pattern and then like working that pattern, into becoming like into operational excellence, or some things that are sort of that rinse and repeat model. But it seems like a challenge, right? To fit a bunch of different nuanced and very, very nitty-gritty like individual workflows into a kind of system, which software is, which sort of like it depends on a pattern being consistent across different practice areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've seen, because IT professionals don't need to come necessarily from law. And when they come in, and it's like if you're an enterprise application, if you oversee the enterprise applications, your goal is to not have more applications. You want the thing that can do 4 or 5 things, right? That makes a lot less friction in some ways. But when lawyers are when we're trying to bring technology into the hands of lawyers, right? It has to be a rinse and repeat. They are, I think most lawyers are usually very open to it if you understand their world. But there actually has to be a methodology, and there has to be a buy-in from a culture standpoint to get out there, work, and test, and weave that in. Lawyers aren't going to want to hear this, but technology is now part of legal training. And why I think a lot of all these things, why lawyers get a bad rap is that it's like, what other industry, someone could probably name one and I'll look foolish, but like what other industry are you building the thing, training the people, selling the thing, right? It's not like you have salespeople that don't practice law.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So lawyers have to do wear many different hats.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the way we make money is to wear one hat and spend a lot of time wearing that hat.
Right.
So we have to figure out a new paradigm, and I'm not talking about get rid of the billable hour. That's not my kind of mantra, but we do have to figure out a way to consistently bring it in. And ultimately, like, I'm not here to come up with solutions, to be honest. I'm here to educate so the lawyers can come up with the solutions.
Yeah.
And we can move it forward. Because I don't know. I don't have time to know what everybody does and all the intricacies of everything, but you can know enough to show them what's possible and them to show you what they need. And then hopefully that's a connection, and that's something that you can build trust and some sort of momentum on.
Yeah. When you think about, I guess, this generation of technology and its potential to impact the business of law, what do you think of first? Where does your mind go when you're like thinking about, driving that kind of operational excellence or finding those opportunities? Where do you think it exists in the highest quantity? Where is it most untapped right now?
Yeah, I think we can just, honestly, it's kind of simple. I think we can just create, like, we're very project-based. So it's, we need to do this, and then we deliver that. And then we go to the next project when we really need to think about it in an experiential way for the client. So, like, honestly, it's not just saying, here's the thing, here's a bunch of documents that we did for you. It's how do we serve that up in a very accessible, user-friendly way. the firms that do that are going to get stickier and stickier with the clients. So law firms that can provide a very seamless digital experience, right, that could also be a revenue stream on top of the legal work we do, but probably cut a ton of friction out. And then once you have that, right, then you can start bringing in the fun stuff.
Right.
But I think what we might get into here is that a lot of people are trying to jump into the fun stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, yes, we don't actually have to do like the hard work.
Right.
And it's like, no, all this, we've always, like people like us are probably like, no, we should have been doing the hard work for 10 years. But now it's just like people, it's starting to click for people. But they need to understand that like Gen AI is great, but it's not magic. And you need to, you need to modernize the way that you work with clients.
Kevin and I sometimes talk about the eat your vegetables moment of like, we all want to go straight to dessert.
We
right?
were talking about the eat your vegetables. Yeah.
What is what's the kind of training that firms need to do to make use of these tools? What is the not fun stuff? What does that preparation work look like?
Well, preparation, the first thing from a professional development perspective, it just has to start day one, right? It starts as you bring in a summer class. The day they come in as first years, right? You get, you might get a half day or a full day or, 2 days maybe of tech training, right? And to the very beginning, you don't know anything, right? You really don't, right? Law school doesn't really prepare you for the practicalities of practicing law. So you need to, that's, I think, the easiest way to instill the culture, but that's a long tail, right? It's going to take a while for all that to matriculate in and to get into partnership, and so you can't just be there. But for me, I can't speak for others, but for me, it was just I've been now in it, in big law for 12 years doing like legal innovation, even before it was legal innovation. I didn't even know, that just happened. I kind of fell into that because I put myself probably in a position to fall into it, but I didn't really know what was going to happen. And you just have to really try to understand the world of the lawyer and empathize. And if you come in with empathy, but you also come in with like I know what to do. You tell me what your experience is and we will figure this out. Then you start to get the partnership involved. And if you start talking about, how we can better please clients, and successful partners are business people, right? They really are. And so who wouldn't want that, right? Who wouldn't? The competition is not getting lighter, right? It's getting very intense. And I think right now the heat is getting turned up. The next few years, it's going to be.
Yeah. What's the heat getting turned up by? Is it just the expectations of clients?
Well, I think it's, technology is driving it, but it's not the technology, right? It's data. It's data like modernization, as we'll call it at our firm or something. But it's data management, architecture. It's going from electronic, which we still pretty much are, or we're doing like siloed digital efforts, but you need to be a digital company. And that's where it's hard, where the food court can be digital in some way. They all need, they all need burners, right? And they need running water, and they, need a menu sign or whatever, and they need to take money and stuff. But then it's like the ingredients are all different, and the setup's going to be different, and the branding is going to be different. So, that is harder to do, but it's going to separate firms from each other.
Right.
And I think in the next 5 years, that will become really apparent who got their data in order. Because that is the goal. It's not the AI.
Right.
That's our experience, that's our knowledge, that's what clients pay for,
right,
along with the talent.
Right.
Right. But now it will also be the experience. I think, which is always been white glove. Like that's been law firm experience. Like, well, we're white service. Like every law firm, that was their thing. Before innovation, it was client service. That was the tagline. Like, we give great client service. You can go to every law firm. What makes you special? Great client service. It's like, oh, okay. White glove service. Anything they want, any time of day, we'll do it. Even if we don't know how to do it, we'll figure it out. We'll tell them we know how to do it. And I just don't think that's going to cut it. You're going to have an identity. You're going to have to stop trying to please every client. You're going to have to focus on certain clients, focus on certain industries, certain verticals where you feel that you can win the day. And that's a tough.
Yeah.
That's a tough. Even if you sell it, it's a tough thing to deliver on.
What does a law firm's data strategy look like? What does it look like to go from like the absence of a data strategy to the presence of a data strategy at a firm?
Man, I mean, that's, we're in the middle of that,
Right.
and we've done some really good things, and we're not at the end, and most law firms are, and you're really never at the end, right? It's a continuation. We're all probably at different milestones, and there probably are some firms that haven't started, and there's definitely firms that have really matured into it. So what you can't do is say, we're going to get all our data in order, see you in 24 months. And that might be low, right? That may be a pretty low estimate. So it's a balance of building, from the studs up. It's taken a home. I don't want to say law firms or shacks or whatever, but I mean, it's like you have this Victorian shell and it's great, but everything's just kind of dated and it just hasn't been maybe taken care of as much. And that's the data, not necessarily everything, because I think law firm cultures are actually great. I love working in law firms. There's a lot of great aspects of it that you're not going to get in the corporate world. But, to have some sort of unified vision on data across, when I'm in my franchise, I'm in, Dayton, Ohio, and I own the McDonald's in Dayton, Ohio. I don't really care about the McDonald's in Seattle, right? I just need to figure out my community and how I'm going to make money off that. So how do you get all that, tethered together? So you have to deliver some wins as you go. What does that look like? I think you start with groups that get it, that already have been doing data curation, and you tap into them, and then you sell that across the firm, and you figure out ways to monetize that with clients.
Have there been practice areas in your experience that are sort of like more data forward culturally than others? Or is it kind of tremendously vary? I would expect that like things that are oriented towards like marketplaces or financial transactions would have a lot of that in mind, but I'm curious about your experience.
Yeah, I think, in the asset management space, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And that's a very hot practice right now. So I think that really, and it's not, there is nuance, and there is, that novel aspect to the work, but there is a lot of sort of like standard type of paper pushing work that goes along, and you can get a lot of data, you can harvest a lot of data, and then so I think that's right for it. I think it's harder when you do like less but bigger types of transactions, right? It's hard to maybe aggregate that in a way that is still relevant by the time that, if you're in like project finance, right? You might have deals that go over a year, and then once by the time, the market and the geopolitical situations could have all changed.
Everything's so unique.
Even from the start of that project to the end. So, and I'm sure there's variables that don't really get affected by that. But yeah, I don't want to call it, this is commoditized transactional type of work, but there is I don't know. I think litigation to some extent can do that because there's a lot of public information, right? If you do any kind of like public M&A, I think that's easy because vendors can go out and do it. Like tech companies can go do it.
Right.
But when you're dealing with your internal private data, right, that's a whole different paradigm.
Yeah. So talking about the kind of eat your vegetables, the hard work, the training that one needs to do before they go and like really try to run fast and sprint. But I'm curious, what does sprinting look like? What is if we're to kind of go on the edge of like the really interesting kind of edgy deployments of technology that are going to change the way that law is practiced? What are you excited about in that regard?
Well, I've yet to really see sprinting happen in the legal industry. But I would say maybe the way I'd frame it is, are you ready to compete? And maybe it's the 400 meters or the 100 meter or the triathlon, whatever it is, right? You have to train, right? We got a big Mike Tyson fight coming up, right?
Yeah.
And, that's announced months before they actually fight, right? They're going to go and train. So I think the firms are saying, let's go get the Gen AI, let's get it off the shelf, let's put it in, and let's get back to work.
Right.
Right. That doesn't fly. That's just not how it's going to work. So you need to train and you need to prepare. You need to eat your vegetables. You need to get to the gym every day at 5 a.m. You know, you're not drink as much booze, you know, until after the fight. And then you go and you show off your chiseled body and you go to work. And you know, even if you can deliver something in sort of the former example, you know, then where do you go? You've built no platform, right, to build off and start to sprint with. So, yeah, I think sprinting will come.
Yeah.
But again, it'll be those organizations that
have done
get the
work.
culture
Yeah.
in order and have done the data work.
And what do you think sprinting might look like? What is that?
So, right. Yeah, I avoided that question. I think it's, look, if I'm looking at glass half full, I think it's lawyers doing really complex, high value, probably fun, and you know, for those people who really like it.
Yeah.
Maybe not fun for me or you, but I think it's going to be more enjoyable, right? Because they're just going to have sort of this synthetic layer that supports them, and there'll be new professionals, right? That are not. We've always had professionals, right? But they've been sort of back behind the curtain. So you got to start bringing those professionals and showing and educating clients, right? That these are part of the delivery. This is part of what you're paying for, right? Instead of saying, oh, you know, we charge a lot for lawyers, so we don't really want to charge them more for this. It's like, well, that's because you're a lawyer. You don't know how to sell this. I don't expect you to, right? You're already wearing a lot of hats, right? And so you have to, sprinting is, we now have another way to sell. We have different types of skills that we bring in that complement. It'll still always be the legal advice, right? And the legal talent, but the talent around it and the infrastructure and ecosystem is going to be part and parcel
Yeah.
to that. So I think we're moving, but it's going to, you know, sprinting will look on the tech side. I think it will be a sprint, and we will start to really get things going. On the law firm side, I still think it'll be kind of similar. I think clients will just want to do more transactions. Right? It's not, you look at the trends of M&A or from the 80s to now, it just goes up. I mean, there's little dips and stuff, right? But it's not going to stop. It's just like, oh, it's more efficient, so we can just do more stuff. It's like we have an iPhone. We didn't have an iPhone. Do we now just like sit around? No, we just do more stuff. We just sit on our phone more because we have it. It's like, so we're doing more like less of more things because of technology. And, you know, back in the day, we did more of less things,
right?
Because of that, and I'm not saying one's better than the other,
sure,
but that's how I imagine it. I mean, we'll still be billing clients because there will always be new factors. There will always creativity, and the human element. Maybe not. Well, maybe not always, but I think really for a while. I think it's going to be a while. But that doesn't mean, you know, lawyers aren't going away, but lawyers who don't use technology and get their data in order, are going away.
Yeah. So yeah, what was your pathway to joining Fried Frank?
Fried Frank is been around for I think about 100 years, and they're just a prestigious firm. They have some really big, deep client relationships. They have some major practice areas like asset management, real estate, but they also have an incredible AI tech practice. And it's really, I mean, other firms have it, but we have it and have lots of clients with it. Like we're doing a lot of real stuff. And what was interesting for me about that, what was attractive was it's no longer like, what was the example? Like there would be a difference, I think, between the technology that lawyers use and the technology we advised on, right? That's converging. We're using AI now and we're advising on AI. This is now a conversation. You know, I want it to be, what I'm hoping is that this is not, I'm going to give you AI, then you go off and do stuff with clients. It's like, what are the clients saying? What do they need to know? What do you need to know? We're out there researching and stuff while you're out selling and doing legal work. what kind of value can we bring to you, and what kind of value can you bring to us, and what kind of relationships can we build with our clients who are some of them doing a lot with AI.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all those things. And I've heard great things about the culture. It has, I think it might have one of the biggest per capita kind of pro bono practices as well in the world. I think the credit hours for pro bono is a few hundred hours. And that just really spoke to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've bought into a little bit of a different model than a lot of other law firms started with. A lot of them started with, and we do have knowledge management, and it's very important. It's critical to everything that I'm involved with. But the technology piece was sort of baked into a lot of the knowledge groups. And IT was kind of over here. I get that, right? IT was kind of, they say no a lot. They don't really know, right? They're very removed, right? This is the old school law firm. They're very removed. They don't really know, a lot of them, what the business actually does.
Yeah.
And so it made sense to start in knowledge. But then at some point, you got to scale. And you have to go back to your IT department. You're not going to build another IT department in there. So anyway, with all that, having someone who's kind of business-facing in the IT department is actually not that common,
right?
Actually, in law firms. I think it will become more soon. So all that they bought in, and they're trusting me more than I actually thought. They're looking to me, and which is why I'm there.
That's great. And so that unification of the technologist with the knowledge, so to speak, into like a single working group seems to be something that you're saying is working well at Fried Frank, and you're predicting that as like kind of a model for a lot of other firms to potentially emulate.
Yeah, I mean, you need cross-functional teams anymore, right? You need the Scrum kind of mindset, and you can't just be like, IT is just no good, and they're just going to slow us down. Well, maybe you need to start slow, so then you can go fast, so then you can sprint. And I think there are some firms that have had to slow down because they needed to tie IT in more. And that's just an outside perspective. That may not be the case, but just thinking about it, if you build it up with IT in the first place, I imagine you're going a lot faster.
Yeah. So has Fried Frank leaned into software as a service models for some like advising on some of its practice areas that it has a lot of data on? How has technology transformed the way that Fried Frank is practiced?
Well, you advising clients?
Advising clients,
I mean, that's a big...
Information portals, things like that. What is market questions? I'm curious if there's anything that...
And how we're using technology to deliver that? Okay. I mean, the great, something I didn't know when I went to Fried Frank is that we do have a few practice areas that have been caring about their data for a few decades now. It hasn't been modernized, right, in a way, but that's kind of almost the easier part,
right?
It's like they understand the value, right? What we need to do is we need to tap into that, and we need to show them like what's possible, and that's when you really get onto the front lines, and you become IT can become revenue generating for law firms. So we're getting there. I think we're getting where we want to deliver software, but you have to do it internally first. You don't test your first alpha app. You probably have developed apps and stuff. You don't start going to market with that before like your team has tested it. Maybe you give it to some family or something, people, right? And that's what you have to do. And also to that point earlier, if you want to be able to sell clients on this, and you want to go all in that, you have to be educated enough, right? You have to know how to sell it, and you have to be able to show the value, explain the value to the clients, and I think they'll get it. And with it, you'll also be shedding a lot of work that they were never really excited to pay for in the first place.
What's a book you read lately?
A book I read lately, I'm going to get the title wrong, but it was like The First 90 Days.
The First 90 Days, okay.
So someone I worked with who was a great mentor at my previous firm, he said, get this book. It'll help you prepare because, I feel like I slid into roles and it was kind of like nice to have, and now it's sort of front and center. So
Yeah.
it's like, and this is not about technology or anything. It's about playing the game, making sure, because that is apparently the science says the first 90 days will determine where you're going to fall, even years down the road in that
Right.
organization. Are you going to be a jet setter? Are you going to be, C-suite material?
Yeah.
Or are you just kind of flat line?
Right.
Or worse, are they really going to divest
Yeah.
of what you're trying to do?
Yeah. What was your musical instrument as a musician?
I mostly guitar. It was
Yeah.
like a singer-songwriter, but I played some piano and even in some bands I'd pick up a bass. And
What's one memory that echoes back again and again from your time as a musician?
what? Oh man, the thing is there's not that many high moments.
Life of an artist.
You know what was cool though? You know what it was? I hadn't performed in 10 years
Uh-huh.
publicly, and then in my town, they have an event, a bonfire event that goes through the whole town. They have all these artists and everything, and my daughters go to school with one of the organizers or ballet with them, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it, And I have 2 young kids. I have no time. I have this job. I'm just like, but I need to get out there. It might not happen again, right?
Yeah.
So, I asked to be, to get a spot, and I went out, and actually some of my colleagues completely surprised me, and they came up, and it was just a really fun time, and I was just like in my element, and which is kind of like better. I feel like as I get older, your hobbies and your interests and your passions, it's not always good for it to be your job, right? And so just like picking it back up and practicing and getting maybe decent enough to play in front of actual people.
Fun. Yeah, it's a good story. What was, I guess, in the last, let's say, 2 years, what's a moment with technology which has been like a wow moment for you?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to say ChatGPT because
Sure.
that's
obvious. It was a wow moment for a lot of people. It was a wow moment for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, a wow moment. Honestly, I think it was 7 or maybe 8 years old. I remember my dad wasn't telling me where we're going, and we go to the mall. We go to a toy store. Looks up, sees this box. It's a Nintendo, the NES. Brings it home. Nothing has ever transformed me more than the NES. 8-bit, loved it. Tecmo Bowl.
Yeah.
Super Tecmo Bowl. It was, I spent a lot of time on that machine.
How old are your daughters?
6 and almost 2.
6 and almost 2. So has your 6-year-old, have you observed surprise at technology with this young generation? Is there anything that's wowed her?
Yeah. I don't know if the technology is wowed her.
Yeah.
Right? Because they have nothing to compare
Yeah,
it
exactly.
to.
It's all just in the air.
Yeah, and she's not, I think thankfully, she's not one that is addicted. She's 6, so it's plenty of time, and hopefully no 6-year-olds are. But I mean, I think she's very conscientious of that. This is just a part of a lot of other things that we do, and a lot of other play that we have, and and schooling that we have. So I haven't seen that. I mean, she just, I think it's seeing art. I think just seeing art and that really inspires her. So it's actually the really simple stuff that actually really surprises them.
What's a hot take prediction for the legal industry in the next 5 years? Or let's say, 1 year, then 5 years. What do you think is going to be different?
Well, I think the hot take in the legal industry is I think we there's a lot of experimenting going on now. So in a year, I think without a transformational tech change, we're going to cap. There's not going to be. I think there was I just put a post out on LinkedIn about this too. But the Wall Street Journal just wrote an article about how we're running out of data. The next models, GPT-5, where are they going to get the data to be able to stay on that same trajectory?
Right.
So again, it's going to come back to humans and using AI to help them come up with. I think it's going to be about design, right? And so we now have to start designing. We've now capped. Not that innovation still won't happen incrementally, but I think we went up to this. The hype cycle, as Gardner puts it, or whatever, and we're kind of getting out on the we'll get down to the trough of disillusionment or whatever, and we'll plateau, and then we'll just figure, okay, because I think it's really hard to design when the the ball keeps moving. So I will see the design in 5 years. Again, if you have not built the culture and you do not have the data in order, I think you're going to see a tectonic shift in the haves and the have-nots. And I don't know if it's probably probably more consolidation than we've ever seen.
Yeah.
But also maybe more boutique type, because why do I need be part of big law?
Yeah.
And then who knows what's going to happen with unauthorized practice of law, new types of business entities coming into the space. I have seen nothing from the legal side that is going to that has put a line in the sand with unauthorized practice of law. As far as I can tell, the technologies continue. I mean, even like TurboTax is practicing law.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've yet to see like a ruling or some sort of besides the bar association,
right,
anybody else, legislature, courts saying that like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah.
You're
interesting.
So I think it's going to be a massive disruption. I think lawyers will be fine, but it'll look a lot different.
And it sounds like the roots of that haves and haves not splits is really like, are you eating your vegetables? Are you doing your reps now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you getting ready for prime time? You're in the minor leagues. Are you going to make the majors, or are you going to become a scout?
Yeah. What advice would you give to people who are interested in the intersection of technology and law, or maybe general advice for up-and-coming attorneys?
Well, if you want to be a really prominent attorney, I'm probably not the one to give you advice on that. I would just say with that is you need to embrace tech. I mean, it's pretty basic. It's you don't need to be an expert, but you need to keep up, and you need to be constantly innovating, not just with the legal product you're developing, but also with how you're delivering that to the client. Because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So business acumen, actually probably more business acumen, which will lead to you understanding that we need certain technology training. But it's really about at the end of the day, you want to probably make decent money or better, right? That's not really about like necessarily how well you know the law. In fact, there's a lot of like super smart lawyers. They're not necessarily making the most money, bringing in the most rain. So you got to understand the legal practice still. So you have to have a way to get legal education in whatever type of like legal organization you want to partner with. And you probably want to complement that with some sort of like other type of non-legal skill, whether that's technology or some sort of like business management. But you need to be multidisciplinary in this, and you just need to be hungry. That's one thing I think that helped me. It's just like I just made it, everything I did.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining today. It was really such a pleasure to talk to you.
No, this is great. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's a fresh way to approach not just building products, but like just immersing into the ecosystem and being a part of the solution.
Fist bump to the datafication of law.